I'm curious about the moments in your life that really proved monumental or served as turning points. Can you talk about this?
Actually, Julie made this comment about women, so as I pointed out, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and so 2 boys. My mom was the typical mom from Taiwan, right? Because she's 77, I pointed out, in the older generation, you test into your school, you test into your profession. The 3rd kid was my sister Joyce, named Joyce because she brought my mom great joy. But when I was young, my mom said to my sister, and she never said it to the boys, she said, "You can grow up to be president of the United States of America." Right? And I was thinking, wow, okay, the boys, we're supposed to be doctors, but my mom just had this incredible vision, which I thought was great because we grew up in a time where, first of all, as an Asian American or as a minority, you didn't think about that, right? Because it wasn't, as you pointed out in your earlier comments, where are the role models? And then my mom said it in the 70s to a young woman. And I just thought that was so powerful. So it's just a belief and hope that you can be anything you want. Stewart?
Okay, I have 2, I think, moments in my life. When you get into this, I guess I got in my career because I was always interested. I always loved movies, and so that's how I got into this business. But I was young. I was in my 20s, and I was in London. And in one day, I got to meet Sade, which maybe you guys are too young to know who Sade is. I got to do an MTV interview with Sade, and then we jumped in the car and went 2 hours outside of London, and I got to meet Sting. So in one day, I got to meet 2 artists that I played that music all through college, and I was like, man, okay, I think life was good, And then the other one I'd say is, and I don't know if you guys go through the same thing, but once again, immigrant parents, are you going to be a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, maybe an engineer, okay, And so my family's still up in San Francisco. So I came down to UCLA, they're like, okay, fine, but when are you going to, expecting me to go home, work in the company business, be a good girl, stay at home. And I never left, I never came back. And so every year, are you eating? Are you making any money? When are you coming home? Once you come home, we'll get you a job. Every year, I had to actually win a Grammy Award before they went, all right, we're not gonna have you anymore. That was the actual pivot. It wasn't the Grammy Award itself, it was the fact that my parents felt I was gonna be okay. A typical, oh, she's not starving anymore, she's, all right, let her do her little artsy-fartsy thing after all.
It's really a difficult question. I'm not sure what the answer would be. I just thought of something that, I remember, one time in my business, when you're pretty well known and people know how to get a hold of you, it's you kind of get all sorts of people communicating with you. And one day, I don't even remember what time frame now. I got a phone call from somebody that worked at the county government. I forgot what that was. And then he was complaining about all this Asian business and how they became a problem, and they better behave themselves. And I say, what law did they break? The guy couldn't mention it, but he just mentioned to me that this is not Koreatown. He just said, you guys can't do this. If you it went on and say, wow, this is how people look at you if you don't organize and speak up. So those are one of the few instances that I say, Jesus. I mean, you just, you can't, as Asian American, you can't just mind your own business and enjoy life without, people looking at you a bit differently. And, the way to combat that is to get really involved. If the same person called me, I don't think they would have that mindset today. If they call me today, I wouldn't let them get away with those kind of attitude and comments. But it was that kind of comment, Oh, and just think of another thing, okay? I was involved in this city commission called the Workforce Investment Board, and we were spending, we basically spent the federal money. It could go anywhere from $50 to $300 million every year on different job training programs throughout the city, and I was appointed to that by Mayor Tom Bradley back in the early '90s. And it was pretty technical, pretty boring stuff. Until one time I sat on an appeal committee. This was one of my first sort of meaningful tasks that I love to name names, and sometimes it's embarrassing. Chinatown Service Center, for those of you who know what that is they provide social services to new immigrants from China and for the Chinese American community. And then they had a grant, and then they didn't get it. And one of the reasons they didn't get it was one of the criteria they had to rank them was how many percentage, what was the English proficiency level of the people they serve, right? And they sort of mark off, 100%, 50 or whatever, right? And they didn't check that off because they thought it was so low that it didn't fit any of the numbers. They thought it was close to zero. So that's why they didn't put down 20 or 50 or 100%, whatever the question was. And then they didn't get any money because they didn't meet that criteria of serving non-proficient clients. And then they filed an appeal. I was part of the committee that this is my early days. I didn't know I didn't know that much about politics. I wasn't involved in the Chamber of Commerce. And then they appealed to the commission, basically say they misunderstood the question. They are really the most deserving of all the applications. But since they did not answer that question correctly, they lost a big grant to other, And I mean, they make their case, and the committee, denied the appeal because they support the staff, I say. I was there, and I was just too new to know, too new to really maneuver and how to create some wave and turn the system upside down, because that clearly was wrong. But I did not feel that I was equipped to do the political work that was necessary to overturn the decision. And after that day, I said, damn it, this is the way the game is played. I better know how to do that. And so that stuff like that won't happen again. I mean, our community just lost a few $1 million for that year because they didn't technically answer that question correct, and hundreds of people wouldn't get service because of that. And so I would not never let that happen again. And that really started my involvement in really trying to study the issues and how I could make a difference outside my business.
Thank you. I'm going to ask some of the C-100 members to answer some of these questions too. So, Teddy, you asked a very good question. How would you answer that?
I think the biggest turning point in my life as a professional was that I had sort of been out of balance. I had devoted everything to work and integrating into my business and mainstream society, and I really didn't feel connected to the Chinese American community until I had done a film with Chow Yun-fat and something called Saving Face. And the way those films were received, I understood that my role in life wasn't just to do my work and live my life and be with my family, but because I had such a visible job that influenced so many people, that people looked to me and ascribed to me a responsibility that I had never anticipated. And because of such great feedback and support from the community for what I was doing, it really motivated me to say, I owe so much more than what I'm giving. And it's really gotten me really involved because of people like you coming out and expressing a need and having ambition and doing all the things that Charlie and everybody else here warned not to do. You're actually going for it. And so the turning point was connecting with people like you.
Thank you. Open it up, see if there's
I just want to highlight Teddy's point. So when I'm a young attorney, Teddy was one of the, he was the star Asian among others, like two, in the entertainment community. And so even though he was involved with the Asian community, but in the entertainment circles, I just want to thank Teddy for reaching out, because all of us were like cheering him on.
Yep.
He was the model of here in Los Angeles, the media, the entertainment capital of the world. Do we have a face? And so even though later on I met Teddy at an event, and you're just thinking, wow, I'm meeting an icon. So
Thank you.
we just have to recognize that.
Li. My question is similar to Teddy's, which we hear the good, great success from these mentors here, such as winning the election, Grammy Award, and also a successful businessman and CEO. My question is, what was the biggest failure, in terms of your life and your family, and what do you do, and how do you turn around? I hear a lot of great success. Just want to know what was the turning point. Thank you.
You go first.
Biggest failure? I wouldn't say, so I've had a lot of failures, right? So, so how I take the biggest failure is and it was a failure of ignorance. And so one of the things I always try to do is I try to keep my word, right? And I even though I'm in the process where there's a lot of dishonesty, I don't want to add to the dishonesty of the process. And part of it, and so I did two things which just violate my standards. Number one, the Mayor Han, who is running for re-election, asked me for his endorsement. I said I was going to support Antonio Villaraigosa, but I told him I would notify him first before Antonio would go public with it, right? And for you, it's not going to be a failure, but for me, it's failure of character. And so Antonio asked for his support. I said I would support you, but wait until I tell Mayor Han. Later on, the candidate Antonio Villaraigosa went out with it before I told Mayor Han. So I just thought it was a personal failure of what I stand for. Secondly, I was interviewed by a media publication to analyze Phil Angelides versus Steve Wesley, who were the Democratic gubernatorial candidates. And I was talking about differences in style, but because I was not politically adept enough to couch it clearly, I said, I like Phil Angelides because he's aggressive. Steve Wesley's a really good guy, but he's very deliberate. So it takes a while for him to make decisions, right? It came out as John Chiang likes Phil Angelides over Steve Wesley. And so it came out wrong. And so it's my ignorance of having gone in that direction without clearly stating it and saying it's not in stating one person's better than the other. And so you hurt people in the process, and that's not what I'm trying to do.
This one's a tough one for me. I mean, honestly, I've had probably a million failures, so it's not about picking which one. It's, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm really struggling with the question because, I have failures every day, but it is about the cup half full or half empty, and I'm not trying to be philosophical or anything. I truly am sitting here struggling with the question because I truly feel everything that happens, it happens for a reason. And if something didn't necessarily go my way, I always looked at it of, okay, there's a reason for it and learned something from it. So, and I try really hard, at least I try to tell everybody my whole life, not to ever have any regrets. And it might take me a while sometimes to make a decision, but once I make a decision, I never look back. And so I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm really struggling with this because, here's a recent one. I run a production company. I don't know if I didn't mention this. I run a production company that does music videos and commercials, but it's Michel Gondry's production company, who is a director in this town. I don't know if you know who he is, but he came out with the Green Hornet earlier this year. Not the Green Lantern, but the Green Hornet. I had an opportunity 2 years ago when they started doing the production to be on the movie. It's here in LA, I don't have to leave my son. I opted not to do the movie. I opted not to do the movie. I know, Teddy's going, you're such an idiot, it's true. Instead of doing a $150 million movie, I'm doing his $2 million movie this summer. So so stupid. But I opted not to do it or not try to be on it because I wanted to try to have another baby. I didn't. But I have no regrets. Everybody around me has regrets. They're like, why did you do it? Why did you do it? But I realized, that is what it was, and I had to give it a shot. And so, once in a while I'm like, but at the end of the day, it was a decision I made, and if I didn't try, I would have been always wondering what if I didn't, you know what I mean? So, that's one of the struggles, as I mentioned earlier with women. I was very similar. I made every decision I made. I wouldn't make plans at night in case I had to work. I was all about work, and in our business, you're doing 16, 20-hour days. I'm traveling, I'm never home, that was my life. And then as I was shifting, it was really a tough battle, and I made that decision. And I like to say I didn't get a baby out of those 2 years, but I have no regrets. So it's hard for me about failures, because I think every failure and every boyfriend or girlfriend lost was really meant to be. It's a learning curve. It's like you were meant to learn from that relationship so you can go on to the next one, till you find that person that you can marry and fight with every day. You know what I mean? That's the
every day.
Not every other day, you know what I mean? That's the process.
Charlie?
I also struggle with that question too. When I listen to John and things like that, you said things that you hadn't said. You wish you had done something. It does happen to us every day, right? The reason I struggle with the question is, when I look at the major decisions, when I make either business or whatever decision, I always weighted the different factors. What happened to me if everything works, and what happened if nothing works, and what's the worst case scenario, and how do I get out of it? Okay. I remember last year that when William Wang was one of the panelists, he called himself a risk taker. And obviously, and he mentioned his failure and how he went bankrupt and came back, a much improved, much stronger business person. I might have made similar decisions that consider risky, but to me, I never really went into a decision thinking that was risky, because I have analyzed all the possibilities and options. And so when things didn't work, it was just, I had thought about it beforehand. What is the worst case scenario when nothing worked in my plan? And could I recover? Could I bounce back? And normally, usually when things didn't work, I thought about it, I have options. So I don't feel really surprised and feel desperate, because I thought about it and I anticipated, this could fail, and just how to turn that into, bounce back and recover. And fortunately, nothing really happened to me that is catastrophic. That in the business world, and everything turns so fast, it's possible. But but I've considered if everything fails in my business, I'd still be okay. So it's not something that I really would sweat over at this time.
So I'm a relentless optimist, right? And my comments just after Charlie, because if you don't like what's happening in your life, you just have moment after moment after moment, right? If you don't like where you are now, or we're boring, right? You can walk out and leave. Not that I'm encouraging it. But you're in a room full of people who may change your life, right? So you can turn around, say hi, make an introduction, find out, and if they're interesting, continue the conversation, if not elsewhere. You can get up and exercise, do something. You can try great food. So I would, for some of you, think about life that way. With each moment, you can change the direction of your life and choose things that are positive to you. So as long as you're healthy and you can take a breath, you're good.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have one more scenario.
Yeah.
It might relate to, because it was around probably the age you guys were. So, once again, Teddy probably went through the same thing. Traveled a lot, was never home. And that was everybody's excuse, the why I wasn't married, and everybody else was, because I was never home to actually meet someone. And so my girlfriend was getting married, and she asked me to be her bridesmaid. And after all the weddings I'd gone to, I finally said yes to her, because she's a longtime girlfriend. So it's 6 months, a year in advance, I said yes to this. And I was a freelancer, so I never knew where my next job was coming from. You can't plan ahead like that. And sure enough, I got a call to do a great Brian Wilson documentary, who's one of the guys from the Beach Boys, if you guys are too young to know. And I was so frustrated because, and it was a 6-month-long project, and I would have made a lot of money, and I'm like, but it fell right in the middle of that one day of that wedding. And I'm like, oh. And so, but I had to. So the first time, it was the first time I actually turned down a job. I turned down the job, I was devastated, I felt like, oh my God, I'm a failure. But I said, you know what, I'm gonna stick to my decision and live with it. And sure enough, a month later, I got called to do Michelle's first commercial. And to this day, it's in the Guinness Book of World Records of winning the most awards. So, you know, it's when one thing happens, if you're positive and you can turn a negative into a positive, you just see it that way. And I'm only going to religious for 1 second, but I was raised in a Christian church. And I was always told, you know, when you see the blanket or the quilt and you turn upside down and it's just a mess and you're like, what the hell, you don't see the pattern. But when you flip it over, it's like this beautiful thing. And they say God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes you don't understand when things happen, whether it's your choice or not choice, and there's failures or things happen and it doesn't make sense. But really, when you flip it over, things really do make sense in the long run, so you have to have faith in that. And believe in whatever decision you make and take every negative and turn it into a positive.
I think the way we're all looking at it now is through the lens of somebody who's highly successful and looking back and saying, oh, that was a bump in the road. But for a lot of these people, I think the question really addresses while you're in it, because they're just beginning that journey. And I'm sure there's things that happen in all of our lives that while it was happening, we said, oh my goodness, how am I ever gonna recover from this? Now, everybody's recovered from this and they know life goes on, but I think it's worth, in even opening to some of the other members, really, what is that devastating thing that you said, how am I ever gonna get over this?
Right.
Herman?
Oh, what was the question again? About failure? Just want you to know the reason I got drafted into this program, because Stewart know I make more mistakes than anybody else. I think it's not just to how you encounter the mistake or whatever. I think as a businessman, the same as Charlie, I think it's how well you equip yourself to encounter the mistake. How much can you afford to make a mistake? You know, do you have a plan B? Think about those instead of like, I'm afraid to make a mistake. I think I always share with my mentee is not, you know, it's not how successful I am, it's how many mistakes I make. I can share with all my mistakes I made, and then you can be a better person after you hear all my mistakes. So mistake is fine. I mean, like the panelists here is saying that that's okay. It's part of your life. Don't be afraid to make it. And as long as you have a plan B, as long as you know how to correct it and move forward and be a better man or person or a woman in the future. So not just advertising myself. If you want to hear my mistakes, sign up as a mentee for me.
Being the lawyer, I'm going to rephrase the question. You know, and I think Teddy's right. The question as framed makes me think of things that actually segue into things I will want to say to you folks about as you're going down this journey. Thing I've said to mentees too is, you know, involvement, your participation, making contributions, all that is an individual challenge you're going to have throughout your journey. When I think about my failures, I think of it more in terms of or even disappointments. I think in terms of my ongoing challenge and disappointment and how much in the trade-offs I can give and contribute and the balance I have to strike. Because, and I've said this before in other meetings, I have great admiration for Stewart and others who sacrifice some of the more monetary and material benefits that you could get from the skills and professions and that we have. I mean, Stewart could have made tons of money being a lawyer, I'm sure, instead of giving himself to public service. My sister is a federal public defender. Me, I chose a different road. I have a very nice sports car out there in the park. And I've said, you know, my trade-off has been, you know, I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, but, you know, in terms of disappointment, failures, whatever, I wish every day that I could give more, like my sister or like Stewart. It may sound a little self-serving to say that, but it's true. And that's why I talk to my mentees or my young associates in my law firm about how much they can do to give back, and I encourage them to get out, and I call it being seen, being heard, whether it's in pro bono stuff or bar organizations. Everybody has their own little meter or level of how much they can give. And that's where support structure all comes in, because how much you can give may well depend on your support structure and how many nights you can be out. Like, I had the same conversation this morning. I got a sister-in-law in town, I got a 2-year-old at home, and I got a wife who said, okay, you can go. All right? And so we all have our ways of dealing with this and striking the balance. And then trying to fit it all into your schedule. We got maybe a dinner Monday night, I think we're supposed to be at. And then I've got 3 other things coming up this week that I have to say yes or no to. And then in addition to all the work stuff and the home stuff. And so you have to strike that balance. So for me, the failures and the disappointments are, I wish I can give more. Because you know what, the more you give, the more you get back. The more, and it's really true. I mean, I'm talking to Cindy, one of my mentees here. You know, some of the greatest rewards I get from this giving is the people you meet, the relationships you make and build, and that some that have been spanned 30 some odd years, 40 years for me, that I cherish, and that, you know, for whether it's Committee of 100 or NAPABA, which is a National Asian Bar Group, there are relationships I've built up over the last 25 years that I'll take to my grave. You know, guys like Dale Minami from San Francisco, who did all the reparation stuff and the redress stuff for the Japanese American community. I mean, that's my generation. And we all grew up together from the 70s on, when there weren't a whole lot of Asian lawyers doing litigation. And whenever we see each other, it's like brothers and sisters, whatever, meeting each other again. We see each other once or twice a year, sometimes at functions like this. And you can't trade, you can't quantify the rewards or the gratification and the friendships that you can get from doing this stuff. So that's when I try to encourage or inspire or motivate or kick at the butt the people that I work with. I tell them, you're going to get rewarded if you do it. The more you give, the more you'll get back. So I've turned this disappointment failure question into something where, you know, again, it's your test of how much you can give. And I regret, again, sometimes the choices I've made, trade-offs, and the responsibilities that you carry when you give, because others often, like in my old law firm, you know, if I make a decision that I'm going to go and work for some other firm, that means 40 people might be out of work. And so you carry certain responsibilities, and you have to take that with you. And so you do what I did, where you try to make sure every single one of them is going to have a job before whatever you do impacts their life. And so that's the kind of stuff that's daily, that's a struggle. It's not so much a specific failure, like you didn't win this case, or you didn't get this big client. It's more that kind of failure or test or challenge that I think you ought to be mindful of, and strike your own balance that you're comfortable with, so you can, whether it's public service or you can go out there and make some money and have, you know, some of the rewards of life, but at the same time give something, then strike that balance for yourself and you'll do just fine.
Thank you. And by the way, I'm trying to let Brian feel successful, so he's helping me do some fundraising. I want him to feel really good.
Hi, my name is Connie Chu, and I'm a college intern with Charlie Wu. One question I had was, what is some advice that you wish you would have known when you were in college, or to college students now or who have just graduated?
go first? I'm trying to think back in the day.
I wish I had more wisdom in college. I was so worried about grades, right? I forgot the rest of the world. So there's so much. You could be young enough to be in college. I just wish I took care of myself, to spend time on the other priorities in life. I don't know if that answers your question.
I actually was the opposite. I should have spent more time studying. but you know, I was never a school person. I went to UCLA, but I ended up, instead of studying, I went and got a job, and I worked while I was in school, and I was commuting from Burbank to doing a job in Burbank, and then coming and barely getting to my classes. And so, I don't know. You know, it's funny, things happen in certain ways, so I don't know what would I wish I had now that maybe I don't want to say this because I'm afraid to say this because I don't want to influence women at all. Maybe I should have started having kids younger, you know, I don't know, but I really actually have no regrets, so it's hard. I say.
Okay, let me restate it now that I forget. Okay, so I'm older, right? So I wish in college I loved learning for learning's sake, right? Because you don't know exactly how you're going to use it. When I was a young attorney in the state controller's office, I had to do a memo for then Controller Gray Davis. And so we're looking at family planning and the health and financial benefits. And so the question in the office is, who can do regression analysis? I go, I think I still can, right? I said, give me a book, let me just review it a little bit, and I could do it, right? Now, I studied hard to remember it, but I think I would have kept more stuff and had more applicability, and I could be a better worker, a better person if I enjoyed all of that stuff and realized it would make me a better person instead of just trying to get an A.
Charlie?
I don't know if I can answer the question or not, but there was something I just remembered earlier I didn't mention in what advice I give to young professionals. And a lot of, when I talk about this, a lot of, not students, other older folks seem to like that answer. So I'm going to give it, I don't know if you answer your question. And, a lot of people, saying we're, Los Angeles, the most diverse city in the world, the diverse community in the world because of all this, different culture from all over the world, different interests, and you're growing up in a wonderful place because this is a town of the future. And the reason I think of that is because when you're in college, you really have time to think and do something about it. And that's a positive way to look at a society that is fragmented and split off to different cultures, everybody looking for themselves. And in Los Angeles, you can actually, whatever ethnic group you come from or community you come from, you can be born and grow and die without really interacting with anybody else. Okay, you can speak Chinese and survive without communicating with anybody else. And it's really difficult. What should a leader do in an environment like that? And I propose that a leader is really it's somebody that can actually step out of their comfort zone. You can do that in college because you can afford the time. And learn about things that you don't know, and to connect to different, connect to different communities, connect to different segments of society that actually you can bring people together. And I don't think we have enough of leaders of that caliber. And because when you're talking about this being the Pacific Century, Pacific Rim, and a lot of perception and stereotype is that Asians are not assertive, didn't have leadership quality and all that stuff that work against you. However, you do have some positive perception and stereotype that work in your favor. Is that if you're Asian American, you must be connected to something from Asia, and everybody realizes Asia is going to be the dominant economic or whatever power in the world, and you might have something to do with it, because that puts you in a pretty good position if you have the substance to really back up that perception, and then put you a step ahead of non-Asians. And And when you're in college, you can have the opportunity to really beef up your resume and create that perception that you are really a leader that can connect different cultures and different part of the world together because you grew up in Los Angeles.
You know, I'm going to add to that. You know, it's a great time for you guys right now. You could look at it as being negative because there is a lot of controversy about China, or you can turn it into a positive because it is a culture that everybody is now realizing they can't ignore, and yet you bridge that gap. So you could turn this into a great positive time for you guys right now. I remember when I was a young producer and I was traveling around the world, you know, when you're prepping a job or a film production, you're doing a lot of phone work and then you actually meet them in person. I remember some person said to me, we were shooting in, I don't know, maybe it was Colorado or something, and he said to me, wow, when he met me, I had no idea. He goes, you don't have an accent or anything on the phone. And so, and at first it took me a minute, I'm like, what are you talking about? And I realized what he meant by that. You sound like you're an American, you know, because I didn't recognize an accent. And so, you know, there's a chance now for that to change. It's a great time right now because people are trying to, I'd like to believe this society has a chance to embrace China and Chinese, and you have a great balance in between the two. I did think of one thing, okay, when I was college. I was pretty driven, I guess. It was easier for me to work than to go to school. So I worked and worked and worked, and sure I had friends when I was working, but I think if I had a regret, or if I wish I knew when I was in college, that though I want to preface this by saying my best friend is still my roommate from college right now. But in general, I wish I embraced and held on to the friendships I had when I was in college and valued those, because it isn't just about work, it is about the support group. And I wish I spent the time to stay in touch and embrace that support group, because that is so important.
Hi, my name is Cal Leon. I was just wondering, you guys had moments in your life where you guys had like fears and doubts in approaching different problems, like certain circumstances that came up and you just didn't know how to deal with it, and how did you guys eventually go through it? Is it through like family support, friends? Like, how do you go about preparing yourself mentally to conquer what's to come?
Yeah, it happens every day. Yeah. So one of the things I try to do every day, and this isn't a fear, right? Just another aspect of John Chung's life. I just try to do something early in the morning that's going to change my life for the future. Talk to somebody who I've never spoken to or something like that, get some particular knowledge, study something that's a little bit different. Yesterday I gave my first speech in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but my staff.
Wow.
But I was speaking to an audience that was Spanish speaking. So my staff worked on it. They said my numbers were great. The rest of it needs a lot of work. You get great people who are going to get you as ready as you can be, and then just realize that you have to accept failure. I'm not going to be good at it, but a lot of things I did as an elected official, a lot of things as I do as a friend, a lot of things. I have to leave earlier because I'm going to a funeral, right? I'm still not good at expressing myself when somebody passes away, right? So it's you just have to understand some things you're not good at, you try to get better at, and live life going forward.
Like a positive attitude.
Yeah, just do it, and if people know you, they'll understand that you're trying your best. And so my wife and I have different aspects. I just like to make friends. I give people the benefit of the doubt until they fail me. My wife takes a different approach. She has a small group of very, very close friends, and then she said, you want to get in my inner circle, you have to establish until I trust you.
That's interesting. You know, something I'm realizing, and I'm learning so much from today in hearing something consistent, at least in the members that I'm hearing, is it's about having that positive attitude, and it's about not giving up. I don't know, when you talk about, what was the exact question? Like, the word you used?
You know, when there are times of like fear and self-doubt, like how do you really like...
Fear, okay, so I just have to, I'm better at giving exact examples. I did a Kanye West video like 6 years ago, and we were closing down Macy's in New York. So I don't know if any of you guys have been to New York, but that Macy's is like a block long, it's like enormous. And they were gonna close it down for 2 days for us, and we had to work at night. I had 150 people showing up at 6 o'clock at night because they close the store and then we take it over throughout the night. And I had 150 people showing up. The entire staff and like all of whatever is about to shut down. And an hour before the shoot, I get a call from my first AD, and the AD is the guy that you see in the movies that says, roll, cut. He's the one to organize everything. I was up till 4 o'clock in the morning the night before, working out every single thing. The schedule was a disaster. We were gonna barely get it done. And he says, my wife's going into labor. I can't show up. And he's the main guy that runs the whole show. And then 5 minutes later, the lady from Macy's comes and says, okay, by the way, I talked to the staff and you're all good to go, but we're gonna charge you an extra $200,000. Let us know what you wanna do. And it was the first time, you know, in Teddy and our business, it's like putting a wedding together, like, and you have like 1 week to do it. It's like the odds are against you, basically, and you have to organize everything and just pray that it all works and come up with a plan B and a plan C if for anything that could happen. And it was the first time in a long time, and maybe it was, we were also doing another video for the White Stripes, I don't know if you are, we were doing everything at the same time, and I'd gotten 3 hours sleep that night, and I actually was, when I said, I told the lady, I'll meet you in the mattress department. And it was the first time in a long time I could take a lot of shots and anything going wrong, I can come up with a solution right away. I actually had to sit down and just be by myself for a minute. And my face started twitching, and I'm thinking, I got $1 million in my hands I'm about to lose, and almost 200 people to feed that I'm about to lose, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? And it was really the first time in a long time where the face was twitching, I was sitting down, and I literally, before going to the mattress department, sat in their little cafe by myself for a minute and just started breathing and going, what am I gonna do? And then after a minute of breathing, you're like, okay, suck it up and figure it out. And I picked myself up, worked my way to the mattress department, made the deal with her, found another AD, and in an hour and a half we were shooting. And I to this day have to think about, how did I get that done? But it was almost a paralyzing moment for me. And that doesn't happen very often, but at the end of the day, I guess it happens to all of us. It happens to me all the time where things happen. I just fired somebody the other day, and it was a terrible thing I had to do. You know, these things happen every day, and you just have to sit down, take it in, and then, I hate to say it, suck it up, be positive, and work yourself through it.
So did you pay the $200,000?
I didn't pay the $200 down. I got it from $200 down to $15,000.
Way to go.
In the mattress department.
You know, in my business, I deal with consumers, and in this electronic age, in the good old days, when there's a customer complaint, they write you a letter, you know, and you write them back, and you have to consider them for 2-3 days, right? But nowadays, people can easily, you know, all my products, you identify if they have a complaint, you know, who they contact, and they know my email, and they, you know, so, and people expect instant response, and there were situations where, you know, I just got one yesterday, okay? Some parent, angry parent, filed a complaint and call my company and say, one of the Easter basket product that I had, and a little splinter from the bamboo basket got in her kid's hand, a finger, and then there was he had to go to emergency surgery, and that's several $1,000s of medical expenses that I should be responsible for, in addition to anxiety and other compensations, and you know, they email you, they contact you, they want instant response. So, I mean, you know, I train my people to deal with that because, you know, I want to isolate myself. There are cases I want to handle myself when they get really bad, but this, you know, I usually have the people that are really trained to deal with it, and to find out more and how to deal with it. And I haven't figured out how to deal with that yet. That, you know, Easter this year was in early April, mid-April, and the medical surgery happened in late May, okay? So how did that happen? And how I'm gonna proceed with that. And if I don't handle it right with respect, I'm gonna get a lawsuit, okay? I know I'm gonna get a lawsuit. And then there were instances where, you know, I pick up the phone and they say, you know, you're live on some radio back east, and and we have a consumer here complaining about your product, and you're the CEO of your company, and I want you to immediate response. And you're on the air now, what do you have to say? So I deal with that all the time, and every time the phone rings and somebody says a reporter from so-and-so, and I just take a deep breath and handle it the best way I can. If you want horror stories, I can tell you in lunchtime. But those are the things that I expect in the electronic age. Like sometimes when I get involved politically in writing checks and donations, and then one day I got a FBI visiting me and trying to figure out who I was, whether my donation was legal, and then after talking to me and then hand me a subpoena from the grand jury. It was just like, I was a businessman doing business myself, because the reason they got me is because I talk too much. The media always quoted me about making commentaries, so they decided I must have something interesting to say about political corruptions or whatever. And those things were kind of, when I receive it, it was kind of, after a while, you just, that's part of life. You take a deep breath and you just go on with it.
Thank you. I want to just see if Teddy, Brian, or Herman very briefly would like to answer that question about how to overcome fears and doubts as you have to move on.
Well, I think one of the most important things is never to overthink something. We all want to be perfect and think we have to be perfect, and sometimes that completely paralyzes us. And everybody has fears. We are dealing with those issues every day. I have a 10-year-old visiting me now, and we went to a movie premiere, and she saw her favorite TV actor, this kid from iCarly, and she wanted to meet him. And I said, you can either go up and say hi, or you can live the rest of your life knowing you were 5 feet away and you could have gotten his autograph. And I think those are the choices we are faced with every day. You can always be paralyzed by your fears and end up doing nothing, or you can just go out and give it a shot. And in terms of the advice for the college kids, it's, you don't have all the answers. We are all here, we have all the answers, we think, because we've lived through all these things. Know that it's more important to do something than to think about doing something, because action always leads you someplace. And the paths that we've all been on, they're never in a straight line. We always adjust as you go along. So nobody out there has all the answers or has the perfect strategy. Just move forward.
Thank you. We have a few minutes.
I clerked for a judge who was very controversial. His judicial temperament was pretty horrible on the bench. But inside chambers, I learned a lot from this guy. In fact, in the year I clerked, I learned more about the law than I had in the last 30 years. But he used to say to me, Brian, you get these tough decisions. How many years you sentence somebody to jail, some decision in some case might affect hundreds of people in their employment, whatever it is. And he said, it's tough, and that's what they pay you to be as a judge. And he said, you know what, I just do this. I just do what you think is right and go home and sleep like a baby. He used to say that to me all the time. Do what you think is right and go home and sleep like a baby. And when you come in through the course of my career, I've had a few moments where I've had to decide whether I could take certain cases or should take certain cases. Is this going to be good for my career, bad for my career? Is it going to be too expensive because I'm going to make no money? And Herman Li was one of them, because at the time we became involved in the case, most of America thought he was a spy. In fact, a lot of Chinese Americans thought he was a spy and wanted to stay the hell away from Herman Li. But again, going to that maxim, the little principle that was ringing in my head, you do what you think is right and go home and sleep like a baby. I decided, okay, well, the support of my partner said, we're just going to step up. And with a few other people, we're going to step up and try to stand up for this guy who we think was getting a raw deal. And I've done that a few times in my career, and sometimes it's backfired on me, not in the sense of my questioning my decision, but economically probably cost me a lot of money. And that is one of my weaknesses as a lawyer, at least my partners would say. But for me personally, again, it's how I draw the strike the balance that I alluded to earlier, and that's how I get through questions of, okay, should I do this, should I don't do this, do I weigh this, is it going to help my career, not help my career, hurt the people around me, or is this something that should be done because it's the right thing to do? And that's sort of how I weigh it, and usually that's how I get through those tough calls, and I sleep like a baby. My 2-year-old doesn't let me sometimes.
Do you want to say a few words on that?
Back to the college question.
No, how about the
It's
fears?
okay, that's okay.
You wanted college to
Yeah,
do
we'll
both.
make it a little short. Well, my wife is not here. I can say that my 4 years in college is the best years of my life. You know that you enjoy it because that's the time that you actually can make a lot of mistakes without major consequences. Worst case scenario, stay for another year, big deal. College, I think the best thing you can learn is probably how to shape your character, make all the friends, date all the girls, date all the guys, whatever you do. Just don't make sure that you don't get into a marriage kind of deal. But those were the best year. And as far as the second question on crisis, I think about crisis management. You prepare yourself, you have a great attitude and all the other stuff. How do you know you are not good in crisis management when you have no crisis? So you learn from dealing with crisis, and you learn how to improve your crisis management while you dealing with crisis. I have crisis all the time, every day. If I don't got to Brian's point, in my business, if I don't get sued in a month, I have a good month. So deal with it.